Faking Forgiveness. Part 1. The Calm Before the Storm. The first decade of marriage. The first decade of marriage unfurled like a sunlit morning, serene and predictable, each day mirroring the last with the comforting familiarity of a beloved song. Mike and I had settled into a rhythm that felt natural, like the comforting beat of a heart. Our lives flowed along a well-trodden path, morning commutes taken together, weekend getaways to the same cozy beach cottages, and our Saturday mornings steeped in the sacred tradition of home-cooked breakfasts. The kitchen would transform into our sanctuary, where the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sound of eggs sizzling in a pan, creating an aromatic symphony that set the tone for our days. Each weekend was a little ritual, a celebration of us. I can still picture the way the sunlight poured through our kitchen window, bathing the room in a golden hue as we shared laughter and exchanged stories over plates piled high with pancakes. His laughter, easy and infectious, became the soundtrack of my life, a melody I grew to cherish with every passing year. In those moments, I felt untouchable, as if we were characters in our own fairy tale, navigating life hand in hand. Yet, this picturesque life dulled my senses to the subtle shifts lurking beneath the surface. Mike was my best friend, my confidant, the person I trusted more than anyone else. There was a comfort in that trust, a cocoon that enveloped me and shielded me from doubt. I had no reason to question our love, no inkling that anything was amiss. But therein lay the danger. Complacency is a deceptive comfort, one that blinds you to the changes creeping into the edges of your reality. The shift in routine. As seasons morphed from vibrant autumn leaves to stark winter branches, those little signs began to seep in like unwelcome guests at a party. I vividly remember the first time he came home late, citing an important client meeting. It was a Friday night, and I had set out his favorite dinner, chicken Alfredo, the kind that had once elicited delighted exclamations. I waved him off with a kiss, trusting in his commitment to work, convinced that it was merely an isolated incident. But then those late nights started to multiply, each one creeping into our calendar like an uninvited specter. At first, it was every other week. Then it escalated to twice a week. Each time, he returned home with the same practiced smile, his excuses wrapped in a warm blanket of reassurances. "You know how demanding clients can be," he would say, his voice carrying an air of familiarity that only deepened my resolve to believe him. My heart wanted to trust him, to ignore the faint flicker of unease sparking in my gut. The subtle signs. It wasn't just the late nights that raised the red flags. It was the smaller things, the nuances that quietly began to invade our space. His phone became a permanent fixture in our lives, always facing down on the table like an obelisk, a barrier between us. I'd noticed the sudden interest in his appearance, a meticulousness that hadn't been there before. The way he flinched when I reached for his phone sent a jolt through my core, a warning bell I couldn't silence. But I brushed it off. Who was I to question a decade of trust, of shared dreams and whispered secrets? The flicker of unease felt like a stubborn weed in my garden of contentment, one I pushed down, determined to maintain the facade of happiness. One particularly quiet evening, I found myself watching him intently as he worked from home. The glow of the computer screen illuminated his face, casting sharp shadows that danced across his features. His jaw was clenched tight, and his fingers raced nervously over the keyboard, each stroke a testament to a growing tension I couldn't place. I almost asked him about it, almost shattered the delicate illusion we had created. But a visceral fear gripped me, silencing my voice. What if I shattered our perfect little world? As I sat there, the silence thickened like fog enveloping a forest, wrapping around my thoughts and pushing out the light. The clatter of pots in the kitchen faded into the background, replaced by the symphony of my thoughts spiraling into a whirlpool of doubt and fear. In that moment, the laughter and warmth of our life felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by a creeping sense of dread that whispered of the changes I couldn't quite grasp. The illusion begins to crack. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself falling deeper into this pit of uncertainty. The phone remained an ever-present barrier between us, a reminder of something I could not articulate. Each time he stepped out, whether for work or an errand, I felt the pulse of anxiety quicken. What was he doing? Who was he with? The questions ricocheted in my mind like a pinball, and yet, each time I looked at Mike, I pushed them down again, hoping against hope that my imagination was merely running wild. Yet, as the sun rose and set in a routine that was both comforting and haunting, I sensed a shift. Our conversations began to lack depth, transforming from the playful banter we once cherished into a series of surface-level exchanges. We would sit together, side by side, but there was a growing chasm between us, a distance I couldn't ignore. Mike was here, yet somehow, he was also absent, as if a part of him had drifted away into a realm I could not access. One evening, I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the flicker of the television screen as it filled the room with muted light. Mike was at the kitchen table, still tapping away on his laptop, the soft click of keys punctuating the silence like a heartbeat. I observed him, my heart heavy with an emotion I couldn't quite name. Longing, maybe, or perhaps a sense of loss. I wanted to reach out, to bridge that ever-widening gap, but fear held me back, cementing my feet to the floor as I remained a spectator in my own life. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I felt the weight of our shared history pressing down on me. The years we had built together felt like a fragile house of cards, teetering on the brink of collapse. I could hear Mike's breathing next to me, steady and calm, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in my chest. And in the quiet darkness, I made a promise to myself. I would confront the changes, the creeping doubts, and uncover the truth, whatever it might be. But deep down, I knew that this storm was only the beginning. The winds of change were stirring, and soon, everything would unravel in ways I could never have imagined. Little did I know, the calm before the storm was merely the prelude to a tempest that would shake the very foundations of our marriage, forcing me to confront the heart-wrenching truths hidden in the shadows. Part 2. The moment of realization. The shock of discovery. The moment I stumbled upon that first message from Alana was nothing short of catastrophic. It was like a sudden crack of thunder in an otherwise dark room, illuminating all the hidden fears I had tried to ignore. I remember sitting at the edge of our bed, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, when a notification from Mike's account caught my eye. It was a simple message, innocuous in wording but laden with implications. My heart raced as I stared at the screen, paralyzed by disbelief. Finding the message felt like holding the last piece of a puzzle that suddenly transformed into a chaotic, jagged image. The realization washed over me in waves. I didn't know whether to feel relieved that I finally understood what had been gnawing at my insides for months or crushed under the weight of undeniable proof. Betrayal, anger, and disbelief twisted through me like a tornado, shredding the fabric of the life I had once believed was solid and unyielding. It felt surreal, as if I were observing someone else's tragic story unfold, and I was merely an unwilling participant. When I confronted him, the look on Mike's face was forever burned into my memory, a cocktail of guilt and shame that hung heavy in the air. There was a pathetic relief in his expression, as if the burden of deceit had finally been lifted. Yet, it was a hollow victory, for I was about to unleash the fury of a woman scorned. The moment he opened his mouth to speak, I felt my heart shatter, the echoes reverberating through the emptiness of our once shared life. He didn't deny it. He didn't even attempt to sugarcoat the truth. Instead, he stood there, watching my world collapse around us like a house of cards swept away by a fierce wind. A numb blur. The days that followed were a disorienting haze, a blur of shattered routines and hollow motions. My world felt inverted, with every familiar corner of our home now transformed into a cage of memories that cut like daggers. I would find myself aimlessly wandering through the house, haunted by the shadows of what we once shared. As I cleaned the kitchen, every dish held the ghosts of shared breakfasts, every chair echoed with the laughter of Saturday mornings. I felt like a specter in my own life, moving through the days like a marionette with cut strings, executing familiar actions but devoid of genuine emotion. Cooking dinner became a chore. The aroma of simmering sauce that once delighted me now only reminded me of moments we would never share again. I found myself obsessively scrubbing surfaces, as if trying to cleanse away the betrayal that stained the very walls of our home. Each swipe of the sponge felt futile, a desperate attempt to erase the reality that had become inescapable. But as the fog of disbelief began to settle, something unexpected emerged within me. The longer I sat with my pain, the clearer my purpose became. There's a unique clarity that comes with heartbreak, a lens that sharpens your focus, illuminating the paths you never thought to explore. All the love and patience I once had for him transformed into something far more potent. I didn't just want to leave him. I wanted him to feel the full weight of what he had done. I began to plot a course that would take me beyond the bounds of my pain, a journey fueled by the desire for justice, not in the traditional sense, but a reckoning that would reveal the true cost of his choices. I imagined how it would feel to watch him squirm under the weight of his own guilt, to see the once strong facade crack and crumble as he faced the reality of his actions. The thought fueled a fire within me, igniting a resolve that I hadn't known I possessed. It was then that I realized I would no longer be a passive player in our story. Instead, I would take control of the narrative, stepping into the role of the author. The pen was in my hands, and with every stroke, I would craft a new chapter, not just of survival, but of transformation. I would emerge from the ashes of betrayal not only unbroken but stronger than before, ready to forge a new path that would lead me to the freedom I so desperately sought. In the stillness of my despair, I found my purpose. I wasn't just going to heal, I was going to thrive. And I would do it all while ensuring Mike understood that the choices he made could never be erased. Part 3. The Gathering Storm. The Birth of Revenge. Revenge soon evolved into my new project, a bitter antidote to the poison Mike had injected into my life. It was more than just a plan. It became my mission. Hours turned into days as I meticulously collected every piece of evidence I could find, each fragment a weapon in my arsenal. I delved into the depths of our shared digital life, combing through old messages, text threads, and photos, all the while feeling like a detective unraveling a dark secret. The cold glow of my laptop screen illuminated my determination as I navigated through the labyrinth of our history together. As I dug deeper, I stumbled upon a trove of betrayals, hotel bookings, receipts for dinners I had never been invited to, and little thank you notes from Alana that stung like knives against my heart. Each new piece of information only fueled the fire of my resolve, igniting a sense of purpose that replaced the betrayal's bitterness. I wasn't just a victim in this story. I was the protagonist, reclaiming my narrative. The intoxicating thrill of seeking revenge wrapped around me like a warm blanket, a stark contrast to the chill of loneliness I had felt just days before. Then it hit me. What about Alana's fiancé? It felt unjust that he was unaware of the deceit that lay beneath the surface of his relationship. So, I dug a little deeper, searching for the man who shared a life with the woman who had shattered mine. With a few clicks, I found his profile online. A wave of righteousness surged through me as I prepared to reach out. I could almost hear the chorus of righting wrongs in my head, a soundtrack to my revenge. My message was simple but laced with intent. There's something you should know. I hit send, and a mixture of exhilaration and anxiety coursed through me. I was crossing a line, but it felt necessary, like a surgeon excising a cancerous growth. I didn't know what his reaction would be, but I was ready for whatever storm was about to unfold. The cafe meeting. We arranged to meet at a local cafe, a quaint little place filled with the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries. As I entered, I spotted him sitting at a corner table, his expression a mix of confusion and curiosity. When I approached, I noticed the color drain from his face as I slid a stack of evidence across the table. Photos, messages, and receipts. All the damning pieces of a puzzle he had never wanted to see. He blinked in disbelief, flipping through the documents as if he couldn't comprehend the reality unfolding before him. With each new piece of evidence, I saw his demeanor shift, the shock transforming into devastation, mirroring the very feelings that had tormented me just days before. There was something almost cathartic about witnessing his unraveling. "It can't be true," he murmured, disbelief coloring his voice as he gripped the table for support, his knuckles white. "Not Alana." She's been seeing my husband, I said softly, my voice steady despite the storm raging within me. And I thought you deserved to know. He looked up, eyes filled with a mixture of anger and pain. Thank you, he finally said, his voice breaking slightly. I'll handle it on my end. We locked eyes, two souls bound by betrayal, united by the shards of our broken relationships. The cafe buzzed around us, but in that moment, we were cocooned in our own shared grief. As we parted ways, I felt a flicker of satisfaction ignite within me. I had opened a door that couldn't be closed, exposing the truth not just for myself, but for him as well. Together, we were bent on taking back our dignity, determined to make our cheating partners feel the weight of their choices. Walking back to my car, I was buoyed by a sense of camaraderie and a powerful realization. This was just the beginning. I could feel the storm brewing, and I was ready to weather it. Revenge had become my catalyst for change, transforming me from a heartbroken woman into a force of reckoning. Mike and Alana would soon learn that betrayal comes with consequences, and I would be the one to deliver them. Part 4. The elaborate deception. Feigning forgiveness. For weeks, I wove an intricate web of deception, feigning forgiveness with Mike. Each interaction was a calculated performance, a cruel masquerade that felt like a tightrope walk between my simmering anger and the persona I was determined to maintain. I needed him to believe that everything was okay, that he had gotten off easy, and that the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior would remain hidden just a little longer. When I suggested a weekend getaway to reconnect, I saw the spark of hope ignite in his eyes. His face lit up with that guilty relief, the kind that made my stomach twist in knots, and without a hint of hesitation, he agreed. Little did he know that this trip would be anything but a romantic retreat. We drove up to a remote cabin nestled deep in the woods, the trees whispering secrets as we passed. The air was crisp, filled with the earthy scent of pine and the promise of renewal. I acted the part of the loving wife, planning his favorite meals and pouring his wine, each gesture steeped in false affection. I meticulously crafted a scene that would seem like a return to our blissful past, masking the bitterness festering inside me. That first evening, I cooked a lavish dinner, succulent rosemary chicken, roasted vegetables, and a decadent chocolate cake for dessert. The rich flavors and aromas enveloped us, a temporary reprieve from the darkness that loomed over our relationship. As we settled into the meal, I felt like an actress in a play, skillfully performing my role while my heart betrayed me with every beat. The unraveling. As the evening wore on, I let the wine flow freely, watching as it loosened his defenses. He sank into the soft couch, lulled into a false sense of security, while I remained poised and composed, ready for the moment when the truth would unravel. Finally, I handed him the folder, my expression cold and unyielding. He took it without questioning, flipping through the pages one by one. I watched the color drain from his face, each photo and message twisting his features into a mask of horror and regret. His excuses sounded hollow and desperate, tumbling from his lips like a broken record. I took no pleasure in his pain, but I needed him to see the gravity of his betrayal, that he'd shattered something he could never truly repair. Everyone knows, I said slowly, letting the words hang in the air like an ominous storm cloud. Your friends, your family, they know what you are. His face paled, and in that moment, I felt a rush of vindication. The man who once lived for appearances, who thrived on being seen as the perfect husband and devoted friend, now stood before me as a humiliated liar, stripped of the comfortable fabric of deceit he had wrapped himself in. It was a cruel revelation, but one he had crafted with his own choices. The silence between us was heavy, laden with the weight of the truth that had been hiding in the shadows. I could see him grappling with the reality that his carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, and while I didn't revel in his despair, it felt essential for him to grasp the magnitude of what he had done. This was my moment, and though it felt like walking through a minefield, I held firm, knowing that the path to reclaiming my life had begun in earnest. Part 5. Unfinished business. The aftermath and social fallout. When we returned from the cabin, the air between us was heavy with unspoken words, yet Mike made a few pathetic attempts to reconcile. Each time his name lit up my phone, I felt a mix of anger and exhilaration. I ignored every message, blocked every number, and with each click, a rush of power surged through me. I was no longer the naive woman who had stood by him, trusting him blindly. I was reclaiming my narrative. But as I tried to rebuild, remnants of our life together crept in like ghosts from a forgotten past. Friends and family who hadn't heard the news began to ask about Mike, their curiosity sharp and probing. What happened? Is everything okay? I felt like a pressure cooker, ready to explode with the truth. I decided to tell the truth. Every holiday, every social gathering became an opportunity to recount my story, piece by piece, ensuring that his betrayal wouldn't fade quietly into the background. I spoke with a confidence that surprised even me, weaving our tale into the fabric of conversations, each twist and turn more dramatic than the last. I felt like a storyteller, pulling them into my saga of heartbreak and triumph, ensuring they understood the full extent of his betrayal. The reactions were varied. Some friends gasped in disbelief, others clucked in sympathy, but all were drawn in, captivated by the story of a love gone wrong. I found liberation in my words, a cathartic release as I transformed my pain into a narrative that demanded attention. With every recounting, I felt a little lighter, shedding the weight of the past and its lingering attachments. A message from Alana's fiancé. Then, one night, as I scrolled through my messages, I saw an unexpected notification from Alana's fiancé, Greg, who had since become a distant friend. The message was short but enigmatic. Check your mailbox tomorrow. A mix of curiosity and apprehension churned in my stomach. What could he possibly want to share? The next day, I eagerly checked my mailbox, the anticipation electrifying. Inside the envelope was a printed email from Alana, and as I read her words, a mix of emotions flooded me. She was begging Greg to take her back, but the details were rich and telling. Mike had confessed everything to her in a moment of desperation, trying to keep her after I had exposed him. Yet, she had no intention of staying with a man who had been so publicly shamed. They had been each other's fantasy, two people caught in a web of lies and deceit, but reality had crushed them both. The irony struck me like a bolt of lightning. Here was Mike, who had spun a complex web of deception, only to find himself ensnared in it. He had wanted to juggle both lives, but now he was left alone, adrift without a partner. It felt like poetic justice, a karmic balance that settled over me like a warm blanket. I reveled in the delicious irony of it all. The laughter bubbled up from within me, uncontainable. I couldn't help but picture Mike's face as he read those words, his facade of confidence crumbling like a house of cards. The taste of revenge was sweet, and as I savored it, I realized I was finally free. Free to rebuild my life, free from the shadows of his betrayal, and free to write the next chapter on my own terms. Part 6. Reclaiming Myself. New Beginnings. For the first time in a long while, I felt free, truly free. The chains of my past had finally fallen away, and I reveled in the sense of liberation that washed over me like a gentle tide. No longer burdened by Mike's betrayal, I began to take up new hobbies that had long been pushed aside. I joined a hiking club, lured by the promise of adventure and fresh air. The thrill of reaching new heights, both physically and emotionally, filled me with a sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt in years. Each weekend, I explored my city with fresh eyes. Every street corner became an opportunity for new beginnings, each neighborhood a canvas waiting to be discovered. I wandered through local markets, savoring the vibrant colors of fresh produce and flowers, inhaling the rich aromas of street food wafting through the air. I felt a bubbling excitement in my chest as I embraced the spontaneity of my newfound freedom, eager to experience everything the world had to offer. Evenings spent on the couch took on a new character. I would curl up with a book, losing myself in stories that transported me far from my own reality. The silence that once felt heavy now wrapped around me like a comforting blanket, soothing my spirit rather than amplifying my loneliness. I hadn't realized just how much weight I'd been carrying until I let it go. Embracing new practices. As I navigated this journey of rediscovery, I stumbled upon yoga, an art of balance that resonated deeply within me. The first class was intimidating, with a room full of seasoned practitioners who seemed to glide effortlessly through poses I struggled to master. Yet, as I surrendered to the flow of movement, I felt a sense of connection to my body that I hadn't experienced in years. The physical challenge invigorated me. The stretching and deep breathing released pent-up tension that had settled in my muscles. Each pose became a journey into self-discovery. With every inhale, I felt a promise forming within me, a vow to honor my own strength, resilience, and worth. Each exhale was a release of the pain I had carried for far too long, a letting go of the remnants of betrayal that had clouded my spirit. I learned to be present, focusing on the sensation of the mat beneath my feet, the warmth of sunlight streaming through the studio window, and the rhythm of my breath. In those moments on the mat, I found solace and clarity. I began to cultivate joy in the little moments that made life beautiful, the way the sun illuminated the leaves in the park, the laughter of friends echoing during our hikes, and the contentment of a quiet evening spent journaling my thoughts. I rediscovered the simple pleasures of life, learning to cherish them without the shadow of heartache lingering in the background. This newfound sense of self extended beyond my yoga practice. I began to engage in deeper conversations with friends, reconnecting with those I had lost touch with during my marriage. We shared stories and laughter over coffee, bonding over our journeys, and I found myself leaning into their support, allowing vulnerability to strengthen our connections. Each interaction filled the cracks of my heart, weaving a tapestry of resilience and love that became my foundation. Slowly but surely, I was reclaiming myself, piece by piece, moment by moment. I felt like a phoenix rising from the ashes, embracing this new chapter with open arms, ready to explore where this journey would lead me next. Part 7. An Unexpected Encounter. The Confrontation. It was a chilly Saturday morning, the kind that wrapped the world in a cozy layer of gray, when I decided to pop into a local store to pick up some essentials. The gentle hum of conversation mixed with the soft shuffle of feet provided a comforting background noise as I wandered through the aisles, my mind preoccupied with the simple pleasures of my new life. As I turned the corner by the produce section, my heart nearly stopped. There he was, Mike. Time had not been kind to him. He looked worn down, like a faded photograph barely clinging to its colors. The sharp lines of his face, once full of confidence, now bore the weight of regret and the ghostly remnants of the man I once knew. He had lost weight, and his clothes hung loosely on him, giving him an air of dishevelment that contrasted sharply with the well-groomed man I had once admired. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice soft, almost pleading. The raw vulnerability in his eyes momentarily shook me, stirring up the flickers of pity I thought I had buried. For a split second, memories of shared laughter, inside jokes, and tender moments swirled through my mind. But as quickly as those memories surfaced, they were drowned out by the tidal wave of hurt that followed. I took a deep breath, grounding myself in the reality of the past months, the late nights spent crying, the myriad of lies that had unraveled my trust, the cold betrayal that had shattered my world. "No," I replied, my voice steady and unwavering, each word punctuated by the strength I had cultivated within myself. Turning on my heel, I walked away, leaving him standing there in the aisle like a stranger. Each step away from him felt like shedding the last remnants of my old life, a symbolic severing of the ties that had bound us. The air around me felt lighter, filled with the scent of fresh produce and the promise of new beginnings. As I moved further into the store, I felt a surge of triumph course through me, a small victory that reaffirmed my independence. I was no longer bound to his narrative, no longer a character in his story. I had reclaimed my voice, my strength, and in that moment, I realized how far I had come. The encounter, once foreboding, transformed into a defining moment of clarity. I had not only left behind a toxic relationship, but I had also emerged stronger, more resilient. I could walk away from the past, not with bitterness, but with a sense of empowerment that filled me with hope for what lay ahead. As I continued my shopping, the weight of Mike's presence faded into the background, replaced by the vibrant life I was building. A life filled with possibility, laughter, and the unwavering belief that I deserved better. The encounter might have been unexpected, but it served as a reminder that my journey was only just beginning, and the best chapters were yet to come. Part 8. Moving Forward. Building a New Life. As I sat in my cozy new apartment, sipping a steaming cup of tea, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. I wish I could say there was a happy ending, but this isn't a fairy tale. Life moves on, but scars remain, lingering reminders of the tumultuous emotions I had battled through. Yet, rather than seeing them as wounds, I began to view them as badges of resilience, each one telling a story of the strength I discovered deep within myself. The decision to move to a new city had been liberating. The moment I crossed the threshold of my new home, I felt an exhilarating sense of freedom. No longer was I surrounded by the haunting echoes of a shared past. I was in a place ripe with possibilities. The air felt different here, charged with potential. I explored the streets, each corner revealing new cafes, vibrant parks, and art galleries. The city pulsed with life, and I was determined to soak it all in. Meeting new people was a transformative experience. I gravitated toward those who celebrated me for who I was, healed, whole, and resilient. I joined local groups focused on hiking, painting, and yoga, quickly forging connections with individuals who understood the intricacies of rebuilding a life from scratch. One afternoon, while hiking with a group, I met a woman named Sarah who had a smile that could light up the gloomiest of days. She became a dear friend, her laughter a balm for my soul as we shared stories of heartache and triumph along the trails. Inspired by the cathartic conversations with my new friends, I started a blog, a space where I could share my journey, my struggles, and my growth. I poured my heart into each post, recounting the raw emotions that accompanied the process of healing. I wrote about the pivotal moments that shifted my perspective, the lessons learned through pain, and the beauty of rediscovering oneself after betrayal. To my surprise, my words resonated with many. My readers grew, and I began to connect with others navigating their own paths of betrayal and healing. I received heartfelt messages from women and men who felt seen in my stories, who shared their struggles, their moments of despair, and the small victories that gave them hope. There was an incredible strength in vulnerability, and I found comfort in the shared experiences that bound us together like a tapestry of resilience. Through the blog, I started hosting online meetups, creating a community where we could support one another. We shared not just our stories, but also our dreams for the future. I facilitated discussions about self-love, healing practices, and the importance of letting go. In this digital space, we celebrated each other's victories, no matter how small, and held space for the moments when the scars felt too heavy to bear. As the months passed, I witnessed my own transformation reflected in the growth of others. Each interaction reaffirmed my belief that we are not defined by our past, but by how we choose to rise from it. The lessons I learned became a wellspring of strength, inspiring me to push forward, to embrace the unknown with open arms. There was no fairy tale ending, but what I had was far more valuable. A life that felt authentic and vibrant, filled with connections and new beginnings. I was no longer the woman shackled by the weight of betrayal. I was a storyteller, a warrior, carving out a path defined by resilience and hope. And in this beautiful mess of life, I found joy not in the absence of pain, but in the richness of experiences that came from embracing both the light and the dark. The scars, I realized, were not signs of brokenness. They were testaments to the battles fought and the strength I had unearthed in the process. Part 9. Closing the chapter. The last step. The day had finally arrived, the moment I had both dreaded and anticipated for months. I stood in my kitchen, a place that had once been filled with laughter and love, but had also borne witness to heartache and betrayal. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on the counter where the divorce papers lay, stark and final. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. As I picked up the papers, I noticed how the edges felt crisp, the ink still fresh. With each passing second, my pulse quickened. This was it, the last step in a long journey. I thought back to the months of turmoil that had brought me here, the late-night tears, the anger, the confusion. I could still hear the echoes of our arguments, the whispered promises now shattered, But alongside those memories were the new ones I had created. The hikes, the laughter with friends, the quiet moments spent reading on my couch, each one a reminder that I had reclaimed my life. With a steady hand, I signed my name, feeling an overwhelming sense of release wash over me. It was more than just a legal formality. It was a symbolic severing of the last thread that bound me to Mike. I closed my eyes for a moment, picturing my old self, the one who had been trapped in a cycle of hurt and betrayal. That version of me felt like a ghost, fading away into the past. As I set the pen down, a sense of peace enveloped me. The kitchen, once filled with echoes of broken promises, now felt like a sanctuary. I turned to the window, the world outside alive with possibilities. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the vibrant colors of flowers danced in the sunlight, a vivid reminder that life goes on, and so would I. I stepped away from the counter and wandered to the living room, where the walls were adorned with photos capturing my journey. The joyful moments with friends, the serene landscapes from my hikes, and the colorful canvases I had painted during my healing process. Each image reflected not just my past, but the vibrant person I had become. Life was uncertain, yes, but for the first time, I felt excited by it. The future stretched out before me like an uncharted map, each possibility shining like a star just waiting to be explored. I could travel, pursue my passions, and truly be myself without the weight of someone else's betrayal holding me back. I wasn't merely surviving anymore. I was living. In that moment, I made a promise to myself. I would reclaim my story from the ashes of betrayal, forging a new narrative defined by hope and resilience. I was no longer just a victim of circumstances. I was the author of my own life, ready to pen the next chapters filled with adventure, self-discovery, and joy. With one last glance at the signed papers, I placed them in an envelope and tucked it away in a drawer, closing the chapter on that part of my life for good. As I walked out of the kitchen and into the world, I felt lighter, unburdened by the past. I was free, ready to embrace whatever came next, and I knew, deep down, that the best was yet to come.